Hey there, and welcome back to another Future of Work Campus Industry Insider. This is where we are joined by some of the brightest minds, by experts in their field who share with us their wisdom so that we can fast track our learning and our experience in that field. And today's topic is one that we all need to get better at, and it's becoming more and more important. But at the same time, it's not necessarily talked about that much. What is it? It's about self-leadership. And we are joined by Australia's #1 expert in that field, Dr. Maike Neuhaus. We actually met online. Thanks to social media, we connected on Instagram, and I just loved her content, I loved her direction, and I love her specialization. And in the end, if we want to thrive, if we want to become a leader for others, it comes down to leading ourselves first. So we are going to talk a lot about what does it take to become a high performer, how to set goals and also achieve them, and what's the difference between those who set those intentions and goals and the ones who actually achieve it, and much, much more. So I'm really looking forward to welcome our guest, Dr. Maike Neuhaus. Hi, Maike.
Hi, Petra. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited. Honestly, I've been following your content for such a long time, and I love the direction that you're going to, and also the specialization. Not many actually take this stand of self-leadership. But for those who haven't come across you, can you talk us a little bit through your background? How did you land where you are now?
Yeah, thank you so much. So basically my background starts in psychology. So, well, to be honest, always in my life, I've always had this fascination with the fact that some people seem to thrive while others seem to get in their own way. And it basically led me to studying psychology, because I was fascinated by the human mind, by motivation, by what makes people driven, what lets people achieve whatever they set out to achieve in their lives. So I studied psychology. I specialized in behavior change science within that, and sort of in two different tiers. So one was sort of health psychology and one was organizational psychology. And that is basically because at the time, those were the only fields or disciplines within psychology where the science of behavior change and flourishing was applied, and all our knowledge that we had in psychology was applied in a positive way. So, you know, everyone who thinks about psychology thinks about, oh, how can we get people who are mentally unwell to get better again? But I love the thinking of how can we get people who are well to get them to flourish and thrive. So really take them from 0 to 100. But at the time, this was not something that was sort of widely practiced, and even positive psychology at the time, and even now today, is not taught very broadly. So anyway, I ended up always working in health behavior change at population levels. I ended up doing a PhD in that field as well here in Australia. But it always bugged me. There was always something missing, and I couldn't quite pinpoint what that was until one day I got so frustrated with it that I sat down and I thought, well, if there's something missing, then what is it? I couldn't pinpoint it. So I sat down with paper and pen and I started writing down anything that had ever fascinated me about psychology and why I studied the science in the first place. And I ended up writing a workshop. So this was completely unplanned. And this is about 4 years ago now. I ended up writing a workshop, and I thought, this is exactly what I love so much about psychology and what we know about the science of human drive and flourishing. And I thought, I want something I want to share with other people, because I feel like it is so empowering. And I just started off in my local yoga school, literally because I didn't know where else to go, and I loved the location they had. So I started giving these workshops. Back then, I called them personal growth workshops, I think, because at the time, I didn't even know this was about self-leadership. I couldn't put the word to it. And you said it beautifully in the beginning. It's because we don't even talk about self-leadership very widely yet. It's not a word we use in our everyday vocabulary. And it just, the more I sort of dove into the literature and the more I read and learned, at some stage I came across the concept of self-leadership, and I knew that that is what this was all about. But I also found out very soon that we don't actually know all that much about it yet, which drove me even further to take this topic up and run with it.
This is such a beautiful journey, because we always talk about make your mess your message, and it's usually actually in a negative way. So you had a kind of challenge or disruption and you learned something, so now you're teaching it others. But yours was actually the other way. You were fascinated by something and you just took initiative and thought, what is it that I'm interested in and what is the missing point? And basically you developed your own IP, your intellectual property, based on what was missing for you. So your mess doesn't always need to be something negative. And I always loved that you said psychology is associated with something negative, but it has a different spin. And I also know that you are an NLP coach, a neuro-linguistic program coach, and coaching is all about the future. Can you talk us a little bit through how you landed in this world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said it so nicely. I didn't know that you say make your mess your message, because I think I tend to speak about things very positively, but I was certainly in a mess and it was so frustrating for me. But to get back to your actual question, so yeah, I did an NLP practitioner qualification back when I was doing my undergrad. So yeah, in the sort of early 2000s, and this was back in Berlin, and it was because I had this fascination with thinking into the future, being proactive, supporting other people in their own ambitions rather than lecturing them around what they should be doing. I love the whole philosophy behind coaching, that people that come with their own problems also come with their own solutions, and it's not about telling them what to do, it's about supporting them to sort of tickle that out of them. And I just really love them that whole philosophy around that. So I actually got this coaching qualification many years ago, and just every now and then have been using that sort of coaching in my work. So I've worked a lot in consultancy, even though over the years that I've worked in research, I've always worked very much in applied research, and even my field studies. I've always worked with people one-on-one and also coaching them individually to adopt sort of healthier behavior. So I'll eat healthier diets, that sort of stuff. And obviously used coaching there a lot too.
And you know,
I use it for self-leadership.
This is so good. And this is also what we see in the future of work concept. We're changing from being a manager to being a leader, and leading means coaching rather than telling you need to do task 1, 2, 3, because this is not how an organization survives. We have to adjust more and more. And you also said your specialization is actually in change management. So maybe before we get into this topic a little bit further, can you talk us through what exactly is self-leadership? Can you explain the concept so that we're all on the same page?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? Because we just had a connection problem.
Yes, of course. Before we get more into the topic of change management and how we can deal with change better, what exactly is self-leadership?
Yeah, good question. So I always say self-leadership basically is lies at the intersection of self-knowledge, self-goal setting, and self-regulation. So it's of understanding who you are, identifying your desired experiences, and then intentionally guiding yourself towards that. So that is it in a nutshell. So there are sort of 3 big elements that I always talk about. But of course, you can probably already imagine that each of these 3 elements is pretty much loaded. There is a lot within self-knowledge, things that you can know about yourself and how to do that. There's a lot about self-goal setting. What does it even mean? Self-goal setting is not necessarily a term we use, but it's all based on that sort of proactive mindset. And also self-goal setting, meaning that based on understanding who you are, what you're good at, what you are hoping to get out of life, setting your goals proactively based on that. And then also self-regulation is basically where you are creating the agency, where you put your plans and your goals into action. And again, that is very much loaded. There's a lot in self-regulation, things like emotional regulation, constructive thinking, self-monitoring, a growth mindset, resilience, and grit. So there are a lot of big concepts that sort of make up the whole self-regulation component as well. And you can imagine I could talk about this for ages.
Yes.
But just to keep it simple, I always think of those 3 elements: self-knowledge, self-goal setting, and self-regulation.
What I love about this concept is it taps into a key skill that we need for the future of work, and this is self-drive and self-initiative. You can't expect your manager or your leader to tell you what's next, because no one knows what's next, and nobody can read the crystal ball as to what you're good at, what you enjoy doing. And if you don't know that, how could you expect anyone else to help you and support you along the way? And
100%.
Also when we talk about you have to have more careers, not just professions or jobs in your lifetime, but actual careers, complete different skill sets, it's more important than ever to change and adjust and create or make your background a foundation for your next step. However, that also means that so many people are confused. They don't have a vision. If you don't have a vision, you can't bring people along the journey. Can you talk us a little bit through how you help people to find the vision and get this clarity that they need?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge first that the way that you described this is perfect. And that's exactly where the whole topic of self-leadership has come from. So when you look at the literature, and you know that I am a scientist, and I'm a massive fan of working evidence-based, because I think otherwise you're just wasting your time if you go with anything else. So when you look at the actual literature of what we know about self-leadership, it came it was first termed in the 1980s by a guy called Charles Muntz, who basically made the exact same observation, or listened to other people making those same observations, who said it's such a tedious task to constantly having to tell people when to perform and how to perform and why to perform and all those sorts of things. It would be so much better if people would just find that for themselves, and if we could empower people to do that. And so this literature actually lives within the organization or leadership or management or business type literature. So this is where it's come from. And the interesting bit is that this is where it still has stayed for the entire time. So you would think if anyone knows about anything about self-leadership and how to find self-motivation and all those sorts of things, you would think it's psychologists, but they haven't adopted the concept yet. And it's it frazzles me a little bit as to why, but I think it's literally just the organic development sometimes of knowledge pieces that we have. And so in terms of, sorry, can you just jog my memory in terms of what you wanted me to answer exactly?
Yes, how can we find this vision and this clarity for ourselves? Because as you said, no one else can give us the direction.
Yeah, exactly, sorry. So, and I think the key lies exactly across those three big elements. So, and that's why we have to start with self-knowledge. And you said, if you don't have a vision for yourself, if you don't know what drives you, then no one else can find that for you, and so it has to start with self-knowledge, because you have to know what gets you out of bed every morning. And I know that we often talk these days about, passion is overrated and it's a Gen Y or Gen Z, I don't know what letter we're up to, thing, that they have this expectations that they need to find their passions, but we can also not underestimate it, because this is where intrinsic motivation lies. And there is a big driver there for anything that we do. So it really starts with your self-knowledge. You have to know about your values. What is it that is important to you in life? Because that is like your compass that determines the direction you want to take, not necessarily the end goal. We're not even talking about end goals yet, but we're talking about broad directions. And that's determined by your values. You have to understand your strengths. What is it that you're good at? Simply because if you can work to your own strengths, you will find a lot more joy doing the things that you do. You will feel a lot more fulfilled when you've finished doing what you did. And you will also be a lot better at it, and you'll be more resilient. You will last longer doing those tasks. So those sorts of things. So they all live within the self-knowledge sort of compartment of self-leadership. And I think, starting with self-knowledge is so important, because it plants the seeds for everything else. If then you look at setting your own goals, they should be based on that. It's not that you need to know everything about yourself first and only then can you set goals. Sometimes we get stuck on that, because then we sort of become a little bit too perfectionist about, well, I haven't got everything figured out about myself yet, therefore I can't possibly set a goal. It's about staying in action as well. You can set goals, and then the more action you take, the more you will find out about yourself. So the more, it's sort of like an iterative, never-ending process as well.
And that's the beauty of it. There is no end goal as such. It's a constant evolution. And this is also what I love about the concept of personal branding. You don't brand yourself once and then you stay like that for the next 70 years. You're hopefully growing and evolving. And this is where the storytelling comes in. How can you bring people on the journey with you, that your change makes sense to others, that going into a new direction all of a sudden makes people excited for them to be on your journey and support you and open doors for you. And you also, as you said before, specialized in change management. This is something that we all have to get better at also, especially when jobs are getting replaced by technology or tasks are no longer required, and we can't put or take our identity on our job title because maybe it's not relevant and required anymore. After we've known our values, what's important to us, and also what drives us, how can we then better deal with change, especially when we think we finally found something that really excites us and then we realize nobody wants it anymore or it's not required? How can we initiate this change?
So I'm not sure I'm understanding your question correctly, but I think if we're thinking about, once you have identified your values and you experience that this doesn't fit into the environment where you're currently working because maybe it's not something that they value or is part of their agenda and strategic direction, well, then that's somehow a little bit like a relationship that falls apart, isn't it? Because we do develop and individually we develop, and an organization will be on an agenda and going a certain direction, and as individuals we will have our own agenda and going our own direction, and if it just no longer fits, then that is really sad, but then that is just the reality. I mean, obviously I'm not a fan of giving up straight away. Hopefully if you have good management or good leadership, you can have those conversations and communicate the change that is happening within you or the new direction you would like to take. And then hopefully, you can, as an organization, try to accommodate that if it sort of, goes into the same direction. But if it doesn't, then I would just say, just looking elsewhere and looking where you can find, an environment that you fit into. And this is probably easier said than done. It can be really challenging to then start thinking outside the box, maybe taking on a complete career change. And here we are again at the topic of coaching. I always say, work with a coach if you can afford it. This is where they can be immensely helpful to take on career change, and then it comes down to just being really creative and innovative, because it might just take on a completely different shape or form, whether that is going from working in person to working online, or working for someone else to working for yourself, or from a management sort of position to something very creative. I don't know, it can just look really, really different, and just being open to all options and adapting to that and considering those options. And then we're probably talking about topics like embracing your fears and, or taking it step by step. So so that is a huge change, and it requires certainly orchestration of a lot of different elements. But I think this is just something that probably happens more and more, because I think as a society we probably become more aware of the VUCA world, so the constant change that is happening. I think long-term contracts are a thing of the past anyway, and I think we are starting to understand that we need to be always ready for change and to adapt and to turn into little chameleons. Do you know what I mean?
So good. And, I also love that you bring up the concept or the two principles of coaching. It's all about opening up new perspectives, because often we're so much in our own bubble, we don't see left and right. And all of a sudden, instead of having two options, the yes or no, or left or right, or black or white, you all of a sudden have thousands of options. And if you see there are more options, you're more optimistic. And with that, you attract different opportunities to you rather than you having to chase it. And in the end, this is what makes the difference between people who thrive in this future of work and those who are getting crushed by the wave of change and constant adoption. In terms of practicability, I know we can unpack so much goodness, and obviously you've got so much wisdom to share, which we're going deep in our hands-on workshop in June. However, what can anyone do to start with self-leadership? Have you got a couple of practical tools, tips, apps, any resources that you would recommend for us to start with?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So in terms of starting off with self-leadership, so as I said, I would always start by looking at what is currently going on for you. So some people might already have a very strong sense of who they are, others don't. So if we look at this sort of chronologically, again, I would say start with self-knowledge. What do you know about yourself? Understanding your values is a big one, understanding your strengths. They are really two key ones from the sort of the self-knowledge element, and also maybe your interests and passions. But so for that, anyone is welcome to head over to my blog, and I actually do give away a free ebook on self-knowledge, so including lots of exercises across the range of elements there. And I also have lots of other tools that I'm giving away for free on my blog as well. You can literally just go there and download them. And those tools tap on the various elements of self-leadership. So definitely starting off with self-knowledge. And then it depends where you are. If you are already taking action towards your goal, then maybe just looking at, well, how's that currently going for you? If anyone is looking to become a stronger self-leader, I would in the first instance ask why. Usually it's because either someone is not happy with something in their lives, they're craving something else but they don't know what it is, or they know exactly what it is and they've tried to attain it already but they haven't been successful. So it just really depends on where people are at, and it's sort of hard to give a one-size-fit-all answer for this because everyone is different. And I would just encourage people to understand, to identify exactly what it is where they're at and what it is they're not happy with, and also what it is that is going well for them in life already. And then identifying small steps that they can take in a new direction, or the direction that they think is important for them. So in terms of, you asked about some resources maybe, and I have to say, or apps, I'm not a big sort of app fan or anything like that. I'm actually trying to spend a little bit less time on the phone and using apps. But in terms of resources, I am completely geeking out on positivepsychology.com. It's a website. I write for them as well, so it's a bit of a disclaimer here. But I love them because they work evidence-based. And they just in general share a lot of knowledge on a broad spectrum, or across a broad spectrum about positive psychology. So anything that helps people to flourish and thrive. And as I said, it's evidence-based, so it's all rooted in science. And it's awesome. They also have master classes. You definitely have to pay for them. So just wanted to mention that. But another thing I'm loving at the moment, I'm doing a positive psychology practitioner certificate through the School of Positive Transformation in the US. Again, it's all evidence-based and they have lots of different classes. I love their stuff. So for me, it's basically websites, good quality blogs, anything like that, where I can get good bite-sized pieces of evidence-based knowledge. That stuff I love. And obviously so many people are sharing their research these days. So that's really good, easy to find.
That's also such a good tip already, because you said that works for you. And I'm like you, I'm a left brainer. I need to have the facts, the figures, and I'm not quite a woohoo person. I don't think it's wrong. It's just a very different view or approach to solving a problem or challenge, whatever it might be. everyone's got their own right in itself, but you need to, and that starts with self-leadership. What works for you? What do you resonate with more? Because otherwise, if you are struggling to believe it, or if you don't get the buy-in, if you're not interested in it, what are the chances that you stick with it and that you remember anything?
Yeah, 100%.
Maybe to wrap up, can you also talk us through a little bit the correlation between self-leadership and wanting to lead others, or becoming a leader, a first-time leader, or a better leader?
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting question. And there is a concept out there that you've probably heard about of authentic leadership. So I'm not a leadership expert. This is sort of not my field of expertise. So I'm very much looking at the individual and how can you sort of become the best version of yourself. And this concept of authentic leadership is actually one that is sort of frequently criticized as well. So I'm not 100% familiar with all the literature behind that. I think the idea is that basically, if you have a good understanding of who you are, you know, and what motivates you and all those sorts of things, then automatically you become a better leader. So I can't really speak to the research per se, but I can say that for me, intuitively, it makes a lot of sense, simply because if you are a strong self-leader, meaning that you know how to regulate yourself, so meaning that you know how to regulate your emotions. Now, emotional intelligence and emotional regulation, those are key concepts for any leader, because if you lose your patience with staff, it's not a good look. You know, you make your staff feel insecure or anything like that, they can't perform. So this is just a very, very fundamental element that any leader needs to have. And I always say that, you know, ideally an organization, any leader in an organization, you know, ideally should be a very strong self-leader, also because they are role models. Because if they're in a position where they're not driven, where they don't find fulfillment, or you know, where they can't perform because the whole idea of goal setting is foreign to them, that's not going to work. You know, so I think in my perspective, so organizations sort of ideally, or you know, should have a responsibility to support or empower individuals to become the best versions of themselves. So to empower individuals to thrive and perform, but also they have a responsibility to create an environment through their leadership where people have an opportunity to realize their potential and to perform and to live sort of their utmost self-leadership. Do you know what I mean? So I think in that perspective, they 100% go hand in hand.
It was such a beautiful summary and also explanation of leaders go first. And leadership is not a title, it's an activity. So it doesn't mean that you have to have a senior manager or manager title in front of you to perform or act like a leader. It's simply you knowing what it means to go through a certain, you know, a one-on-one interview, of leading a team, of going through different coaching practices, for example, also, because then you can be an authentic leader because you literally apply your knowledge and expertise and experience with it on others. And this is what people are picking up. And there, you know, there's a good reason why some are chosen as a leader, even though they don't have the title. It's because we trust them, we are inspired by them, we want to follow their vision. And others have the title, but nobody respects them. No one buys into what they've got to say. And this is, you know, very dangerous.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah.
Love it. There were so many gold nuggets. Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom. And this is just the beginning, because we are joined by you in June for our workshop. But in the meantime, I'll link all your resources that you're sharing with us in the show notes. Where can everyone find you, connect with you, and learn more about you?
Probably best either on Instagram, so my handle is Dr Maike Neuhaus, or on my website, drmaike-neuhaus.com, which I'm very happy that you're going to link it underneath the video, because people obviously won't know how to spell that, because my name is just asking for trouble in the international world. But yeah, that's where you can find me, download some tools, download my ebook for free. Yeah, we'll be very happy for anyone to join the community.
Incredible. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm really looking forward to learning more from you.
Thank you so much for having me, Petra. It was a pleasure.